From Rio Grande Valley Border Patrol, John Morris, Division Chief Operations. John, welcome back to KQRV. And
thank you.
how are things on the ground? Let's start with the processing center down at, what is it, Ursula, near Military.
Yep.
We see pictures of the overflow at that center. What's going on nowadays?
Well, unfortunately, a lot hasn't changed. Still seeing tremendous flow of family units and unaccompanied children. Still seeing lots of folks from different nations. We're already up to 60 different nationalities of people we've apprehended here in the RGV.
Wow.
Averaging still around 1,600 apprehensions a day, and we're just shy of 250,000 for the year.
Still averaging 1,600 daily.
Yes. So
that's a caravan. Daily?
It is.
Daily.
It is. That's what we tell everybody that comes through here, from the secretary to the vice president to generals and admirals. We're like, there's a caravan that comes through here every week. So, when you see the caravans on TV coming up south, going to other sectors, they're not quite as prepared to handle these as we are, since we've been dealing with this since 2014. But we have a caravan here every week, almost every day. So what that means is all of our facilities still stay overflowing. Our total capacity is 3,300 in custody. We're currently sitting on 7,300. We've been a little over 9,000 a few times. So there's this kind of yo-yo effect every time we kind of get caught up, and we can get the rest of the governmental enterprise to move these folks to longer-term detention facilities. Remember, we're processing, not detention. But then we'll get a big flood again. And so we've got people outside. They're in sally ports. They're in tents. We've got people waiting for hours out in the field. It's a huge concern to us with this heat right now. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the heat and humidity has been kicking in. We want to make sure they're safe. Obviously, life safety is always our number one priority. And it's just tough, Sergio, right? Because we don't have enough transport. We don't have enough space. And so we've got women and children and older people sitting out in the brush in the heat, waiting to get into one of our, unfortunately, already overcrowded facilities. And while all of this is going on, you still have the narcotics and the MS-13 and the aggravated felons that are still coming across the border, and we just can't get to them because we're busy taking care of this humanitarian piece.
How much of your staff? How big is your staff, Rio Grande Valley sector? How much personnel you have to out there on the field, and then from that inventory, how much are you dedicating to the processing center at McAllen and the holding stations across the valley to take care of humanity?
Yeah, so that's the scary part, Sergio. This sector has about 3,200 agents and about 220 professional staff, so the civilian support staff, mechanics and budget people and personnel, et cetera. We had been running about 40% dedicated to this humanitarian piece. We're closing in on 60%. That means everything that Congress gave us and funded us for, there's only about 40% of that out there actually doing border security work, because every other station, every other facility is soaking up all of our manpower to take care of this humanitarian piece.
John Morris is Division Chief, Rio Grande Valley Border Patrol. He's in charge of operations.
Yeah, Chief, Tim Sullivan here. You're overwhelmed, no doubt about that, at that central processing facility. How many doctors, nurses, medical staff walk in and out of there daily to do medical checks on the migrants held there?
So, Tim, let me back up for a second. It's not just the CPC. Every station in this sector, we have 9 stations in this sector, is overflowing. So it's not just the CPC like it was in 2014. So any station you go to, from Kingsville, Brownsville, Rio Grande City, they are all full. They are overfull to capacity. So the medical contracts that we had in place, which are for screening, because we are seeing an increase in sick people, injured people. We have to go take people directly to the hospital. That medical contract is no longer sufficient, because now we need medical personnel at all of our facilities, and we're getting there, but we're just not quite there. So we have to do a central place to triage the folks, if you will, do initial medical screenings. We've actually had to take one station offline, and it is nothing but a sick bay station right now. So they're barely doing any border security operations, and we just hold all the sick people there. So we're having to dole out the limited medical staff that we have.
Who do you contract with?
So CBP, in conjunction with the Department of Homeland Security, manages that contract for us. and it comes as part of a total package because we have to contract food, we have to contract cleaning, we contract some of the transportation. So those are all national level contracts.
So let's just pin it down to the CPC. How many members of a medical staff do walk in and out of there each day?
I can't give you the exact numbers right now, but we do have medical staff on duty 24 hours a day at the CPC, and that can range from either doctors, nurse practitioners, paramedics, all licensed medical staff, fully accredited, fully licensed medical providers.
With the short staff and the lack of resources at this point, is there anything more you can do to get those migrants, out of there within that 72-hour federally required time period?
So that's the trick, right?
Yeah, right.
There is nothing Border Patrol can do because whether it's enforcement and removal operations, which is part of ICE, or it's Office of Refugee Resettlement, part of Health and Human Services for the children, when they get full, they just tell us, sorry, we're full. We can't take any more people. Unfortunately, my agents down at the line can't say, sorry, we're full, don't come across. So there really is nothing we, Border Patrol, can do. It's up to the rest of the government agencies to get these bodies moving.
Division Chief, Rio Grande Valley Border Patrol, in charge of operations, John Morris, in studio at KURV. Tell working people the intake process when you encounter people at the border and either they surrender or you catch them. They split off into, like 3 or 4 different branches. Tell people where they might be going because that's part of the process that you are in charge of as you have to bring these people in and process these folks properly, as you said, either Health Human Services or removal or something else.
So there's 2 groups that are coming across. There's those that want to get away from us, and there's those that want to turn themselves in. So the ones that want to get away from us, so that's the same since 1924. They're coming for whatever kind of things they want to do, whether that's they're moving illegal narcotics, they're here just to go look for work, whatever it is. That's the standard Border Patrol fare, and then, of course, mixed in with that are different kinds of criminals, gang members, not all of them, but that's where that group resides. But the family units that are coming in, that's the biggest piece. So the way that process works is they're going to come across the river by a guide, and they literally know where to come walk to because there's just too many of them. So we have certain areas located along the river, and we know they're going to walk up there. The very first thing we do is do an initial medical screening. There's either an EMT or a paramedic on scene. Certainly we want to see if anybody has any traumatic injuries, life-threatening illnesses, et cetera. Assuming if they do, then we will take them straight to a hospital. If they don't, we do some initial screening, so who's a family unit, who's your child, who's your father, et cetera, et cetera. We'll break those into groups to decide where we want to take them. Once they get into the office, they're then going to be screened again by kind of a higher level medical person, if you will. So whether it's a doctor or a nurse practitioner, what have you, we're going to do initial records checks. We're also going to do some screening for family units because right now we know for a fact, well documented, at least 30% of the family units that are coming across are fake family units. That means either it's not really their mother or their father, or the person claiming to be a juvenile is not a juvenile. If that's the case, then we will set that person up for prosecution, obviously, because they're trying to commit fraud or misrepresentation. And if they are family units, they're going to go into different holding areas. So some facilities only hold female head of households. Some facilities only hold male head of households. And then, of course, if they're unaccompanied children, they're going to go to a certain station or location where only the unaccompanied children go. So it's really kind of it's a very in-depth screening process, lots of different forms, different processing measures. And, of course, that's part of the draw is it takes a lot to get all this done. And then, of course, you have to keep track of everybody as they're going because they're moving to multiple facilities, multiple levels of paperwork. It's a very lengthy process.
And branching off to from something, what you said, recycling children.
Yes.
Fascinating. And this came from, I think it was Kevin McAleenan who revealed this a few weeks ago. You guys have been at it investigating.
Yes.
How children are being used to bring in strangers and then somehow winding back down in Mexico and bringing in more people.
Yes.
How many? Can you explain that situation?
Sure. So there's a couple different ways these children are getting abused. So there's the recycling, if you will. So right now there's a lot of restrictions on either fingerprinting or photographing children. And so it was up to a very astute Border Patrol agent that noticed, I think I've seen this kid somewhere before, and went back through the records, actually found his picture with a different adult. And then that was kind of the first tip of the iceberg that we were like, hey, they're recycling
What
children.
was that, John?
A
year ago? 6 months ago?
It's been within a year. Within a year.
All right.
And so then what we increased our interviews. That's when we kind of always suspected it, but just the flow was too intense to have everybody coming through. So then we actually started doing more interviews of people on the family units that we know are false, documented by admission by the adults. And what we're finding is there are people that are renting children down in Central America. There are people that are actually kidnapping children and then selling them off to people to use as quote unquote their get out of jail free card when they come across. Sergio, the problem with this is the flow is so great and our resources are so limited. My fear is, and really I think the whole of the Border Patrol and federal government, is we're just scratching the tip of the iceberg on the amount of abuse that these children are being in and the amount of fraud that's being perpetrated. Because make no mistake about it, it is well advertised in Central America. If you bring a child, you will get released. And so they're going to, any measures to bring a child with them.
John Morris, Division Chief Operations, Rio Grande Valley Border Patrol, our guest right now.
So, Chief, you're king for a day. Let's just do a hypothetical, right?
Okay.
If we can. What would you order be done to solve this situation, both here domestically and at the source in Central America?
I'm not sure even king for a day could fix all of those things, Tim. But at least for this nation and the way our immigration system is supposed to work in border security, we've got to take away the incentive. And so that's why within the immigration laws, there's this thing called repatriation or deportation, if you will. Somebody that doesn't have a right to enter or be in this country is subject to deportation to their home country. When you start doing that, this doesn't stop the flow, but this major humanitarian piece, it stops that piece. We've shown it time and again. The statistics will show you over the years, every time there is a consequence for breaking immigration laws, the numbers go down. Right now, there is zero consequence for entering the country illegally as long as you have a child with you. That takes care of that piece. And then as the president has said many times, as has leadership within DHS and Border Patrol, we need to finish out the infrastructure, the personnel, and the technology that we need to help secure the border. And that's what significantly slows down the narcotics, the aggravated felons, the gang members, those that are trying to get away from us. That's how you fix these two problems. Unfortunately, I'm not king for a day, and so that's going to be up to Congress and the White House to figure it out. Down south, it's like, many other underdeveloped countries. They need infrastructure, they need jobs, they need education. They need their country to be a place they don't want to live, that they want to stay there. And we talk about what's going to happen in Central America if this doesn't stop for another 3 to 5 years. There's going to be a whole generation of children missing. Who's going to be left for those countries down there?
Is it too early to tell if the Mexican initiative putting troops on their southern border to try to control their border, is it too early to tell if it's slowing down the tsunami of humanity headed this way?
It is too early to tell, because one of the things that we're constantly having to remind folks that come down here and they want to see immediate effects, there's a pipeline, if you will. So as soon as they've crossed into Mexico, there's a 30-day window when all of those people are still in transit to the U.S. So even if Mexico were to shut down their border today or tomorrow, it's going to take at least 30 days for us to see what effect that's going to have, because all those people that are already in Mexico on their way, they're still on their way here regardless of what Mexico does.
To get here.
Yes.
Of all the data and information you brought with you, I don't want to leave anything out. I want to make sure that it's properly chronicled, recorded for people to go back and listen to and understand what's taking place. Anything else you want to share of the information you brought there, either information on stash houses, the checkpoints, anything else that you want people to know?
Well, it's just the reminder, Sergio. All those things still go on, right? The stash houses, the children that get left out by the smugglers, people are, expiring out in their ranches. There's still pursuits going on. And unfortunately, those issues, right? So it affects both us here locally and the nation as a whole, because they're all tied to the border security piece. Those things are going to go unaddressed or insufficiently addressed as long as the Border Patrol is having to deal with the humanitarian piece. And we just need some legislative help to close this loophole so we can get back to the business of securing America's border.
John Morris, thanks for stopping by.
No, thank you.
He's in charge of operations, Division Chief, at Rio Grande Valley Border Patrol, John Morris, joining us on the Morning News.